My name is Samira, and I'm 24 years old. For most of my life, I truly believed the happiest day I would ever experience would be my wedding day. The day when every dream I had pictured would finally become real. But 1 week before my wedding, something happened that completely destroyed the life I thought I was about to start. Later, I discovered that my own mother had secretly canceled every single wedding vendor behind my back. The flowers. The catering. Even the venue. At first, I had no idea anything was wrong. Everything still looked perfectly normal on the outside. I was living inside that happy bubble every bride knows so well. The one filled with color palettes, seating charts, dress fittings, and late-night phone calls with my fiancé Amir while we talked about the future we were about to build together. We had been planning the wedding for almost a year. 200 guests had already been invited. The venue was a beautiful garden just outside the city, surrounded by tall white arches and rows of cherry blossom trees that were supposed to bloom during the exact week of our ceremony. The florist had promised soft pink arrangements everywhere. The caterer had created a special menu inspired by dishes my dad used to love before he passed away. Every small detail felt personal and meaningful. My mom had been involved in the planning from the very beginning, which at the time I thought was sweet. She insisted on helping with phone calls, appointments, and payments, saying she wanted to make sure her only daughter had a perfect wedding. Looking back now, I realize that was exactly how she slowly gained control over everything. About 10 days before the wedding, small but strange things began happening. My florist suddenly stopped replying to my messages. The catering manager told me he would confirm something later. And when I called the venue coordinator, she sounded nervous, like she was holding something back. At the time, I told myself it was just normal wedding stress. Amir kept saying not to worry. Vendors get busy during wedding season all the time. I wanted to believe him. But 3 days later, everything changed. I was sitting at home finishing the seating chart when my maid of honor, Lena, walked into the room looking pale. She was holding her laptop tightly. "Samira," she said quietly, "I think something is wrong." My stomach dropped before she even finished speaking. Slowly, she turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was an email conversation between the venue coordinator and someone using my mother's name. The message said the wedding had been canceled by the bride's family and that all services were no longer required. At first, I actually laughed. It sounded ridiculous. My mom would never do something like that. She was the one who kept encouraging me to make the wedding bigger. She had been inviting distant relatives and proudly telling everyone about it. But Lena kept scrolling. More emails appeared. The florist confirming cancellation. The catering company acknowledging termination of the contract. Every message ended with the same polite sentence. As requested by the bride's mother. It felt like the ground had vanished beneath my feet. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone and called my mom immediately. When she answered, she sounded calm. Almost cheerful. I asked her directly if she had canceled anything connected to my wedding. There was a long pause on the line. The kind of silence that feels louder than words. Then she sighed and said something I will never forget for the rest of my life. She told me she had done it because she was saving me from ruining my future. Confused and hurt, I demanded that she explain what she meant. That's when she admitted something even worse. A few days earlier, she had spoken privately with Amir. And during that conversation, she said something cruel. "My daughter is damaged goods," she told him. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life." Hearing those words felt like someone had knocked the air out of my lungs. My own mother had said that about me. I didn't even understand why. She refused to explain properly. She only repeated that she was trying to stop the marriage before it was too late. I hung up the phone feeling completely numb, like my mind couldn't process what had just happened. The next morning, I started calling every vendor myself. I hoped there had been some kind of mistake. But one by one, they all confirmed the same thing. The wedding had been canceled nearly a week earlier. Deposits were gone. Bookings had been released. The celebration I had spent months planning had vanished through a few quiet phone calls I didn't even know about. All I could think about was the nightmare that might happen next. 200 guests arriving on our wedding day and finding nothing but an empty venue. I thought everything was over. I believed my mother had destroyed the most important day of my life. What I didn't realize yet was that someone else had already discovered what she had done. And that person had secretly been preparing something for 6 months. That night, I sat on the floor of my apartment surrounded by wedding binders, decorations, and contracts that suddenly felt useless. The venue was cancelled. The flowers were gone. The caterer had already given my date to another event. The humiliation I imagined made my chest tighten. Relatives whispering. Guests asking questions. Amir's family was probably wondering what kind of chaos they were about to marry into. And those painful words kept repeating in my mind. My daughter is damaged goods. Amir came over later that evening after work. I expected him to look unsure. Maybe even distant after everything my mother had said to him. Instead, he walked straight into my apartment and pulled me into a tight hug before I could say a single word. I asked him what my mom had actually told him. He looked uncomfortable, but he was honest. She had shared private things from my past and twisted them into something ugly. She told him marrying me would ruin his future. Amir said he listened quietly. Then he gave her a very simple answer. He was marrying me because he loved me. Not because he expected me to be perfect. Hearing that made my eyes fill with tears for the first time all day. But love alone couldn't magically bring back a cancelled wedding. Everything still felt destroyed. I told him maybe we should postpone the wedding. Maybe we needed time to figure everything out before making another decision. That's when Lena cleared her throat from the corner of the room with a strange little smile. She had been quiet most of the evening, just watching both of us carefully. Then she said something that completely confused me. She reminded me of something that would later appear in a viral headline. My maid of honor had been secretly planning something for 6 months. I stared at her, completely shocked. 6 months? Planning what? She slowly closed her laptop and began to explain. She said she had suspected something like this might happen long before the cancellations. My mother had always been controlling. Always trying to shape my life into the version she believed was right. During the early wedding planning, Lena noticed how aggressively my mom tried to control the vendors and the finances. It made her uneasy. So quietly, without telling anyone, not even me, she started building a backup plan. At first, I honestly thought she was joking. But then she explained everything. Months earlier, she had secretly reserved a small private vineyard outside the city under her own name. It wasn't the giant garden venue I had originally booked. But it was beautiful. Peaceful. Intimate. She had also stayed in touch with another catering company that still had that same weekend open. A photographer friend owed her a favor. And decorations could easily be replaced with simple lights and fresh flowers from a local supplier. I could barely process what she was telling me. I asked her why she never said anything before. She shrugged. She didn't want to stress me out unless the worst actually happened. And now, it had. For the next 2 days, we moved like a team planning a secret mission. Phone calls were made. Deliveries were arranged. Amir's family immediately stepped in to help. My cousins volunteered to decorate the vineyard themselves. Guests quietly received new location details through messages and emails. Slowly, something unexpected started replacing the earlier despair. Hope. My mother believed she had completely destroyed the wedding. She had no idea another one was quietly being rebuilt somewhere else. Finally, the day arrived. The original venue, the empty garden she had cancelled, remained silent and unused. But across town, at the vineyard Lena had secured months earlier, fairy lights glowed between rows of grapevines. Long wooden tables were covered with soft white cloth. Music floated through the warm evening air. One by one, all 200 guests arrived. Not to an empty disaster. but to a celebration that somehow felt even more magical than the original plan. And then something none of us expected happened. My mom showed up. Apparently a relative had told her the wedding was still happening somewhere. She walked into the vineyard looking confident at first. She was probably expecting confusion. Maybe even a complete disaster. Instead, she stepped into a glowing celebration filled with laughter, music, and cheering guests while Amir and I stood together under a simple wooden arch. I will never forget the look on her face. Shock. Confusion. Silence. She had spent a week secretly destroying everything, believing she had completely stopped the wedding. But instead, she had walked straight into a full celebration she could no longer control and could not stop. In that moment, I understood something important. The people who truly loved me had built something stronger than her sabotage. The ceremony continued. Our vows were spoken. And when the crowd burst into applause, my mother stood there speechless, surrounded by proof that her plan had failed. Later that night, as Amir and I shared our first dance under the glowing vineyard lights, I realized something I will never forget. Family is not defined by the people who try to control your life. Family is defined by the people who stand beside you when everything falls apart.